Hello and welcome to Budget with Business Standard. I'm Nivedita Mukherjee. We have a rich mix in today's episode, from direct taxes to rural expenditure. Let's begin with something that is of huge interest to all. If there was a TRP rating for budget, this segment would have been a clear winner. That's right, I'm talking about direct taxes. For more than 2 years now, income stress has been a reality in the pandemic situation. Will the finance minister take note and make changes in direct taxes? If not, what could be the reasons? Watch this report.
Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman could rise to present the Union Budget 2022 when the country is right in the middle of the third wave. This means that easing the burden of taxpayers and salaried classes is likely to be one of her priorities, as household incomes and consumption are still stressed due to the continuing uncertainty around COVID-19. By all accounts, including our own reportage at Business Standard, the budget makers may not bring any tweaks to personal income tax. The thinking in Finance Ministry is that if the existing rates are changed, while some section of taxpayers may benefit, others may see a rise in their income tax liabilities, since the government will also have to ensure that there is minimal revenue foregone. The view is that perhaps people are not ready for big changes in tax rates. The upcoming elections in states like Uttar Pradesh and Punjab is also a factor that the political leadership is considering. Privately, officials have conceded that had it not been for the pandemic, major personal income tax reforms would have been the next frontier for the government after GST and reduction in the corporate tax rate. These reforms would have involved major changes in tax rates, which could have increased the burden of some taxpayers.
Definitely not expecting any big tax cuts, both on personal income tax level and the corporate tax level. I think for corporates, the government has slashed the tax rate as much as it could have, back in 2019. We don't think that that's going to happen. But expectation definitely is for the government to sort of focus on healthcare, to focus on infrastructure, and more particularly, sort of rationalize the existing provisions. While that's been its effort over the last 2-3 years, to make sure that the tax provisions are rationalized, that there is ease of compliance and administration, there's still a lot of headroom, right? So for example, if from the industry, there's a demand for allowing tax deduction for CSR expenses, which is currently not there.
Yes.
There is a big a big voice in the industry which is saying that, look, this is not a personal expense that we're incurring and therefore it should be tax deductible. Similarly, there are certain expenses that come out in any sort of M&A transaction, whether it's non-compete fee or goodwill expenses.
The last tweaks in the personal income tax rates came in the 2020-21 Union Budget just before the pandemic struck India. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman had announced reduced tax rates for those willing to forego certain exemptions and deductions. For the 5 to 7.5 lakh annual income bracket, the rate was reduced to 10% from 20%. Meanwhile, in corporate taxes, Sitharaman has already reduced rates in 2019. What this led to was, for the first time in at least 5 years, personal income tax in 2021 exceeded corporate taxes. This is a fact that the budget makers will be acutely aware of, and correcting this could mean widening the tax rate to bring in more small and medium-sized enterprises. But then, the centre will have to keep in mind the need for corporates to invest more. With that in mind, there could be some tax stops for investment in sunrise sectors like green energy and big infrastructure projects.
So I think having a look at the entire compliance burden from a regulatory and tax perspective would be a good thing for the government to take up in the coming year. The second thing, which is a little bit of concern, is the high tax rates, particularly for individuals at the highest level. Now, these are high net worth individuals or wealthy individuals, and the kind of taxes they have to pay in India, the maximum rate is 42-43%. So while it may sound justified and fair that if you are making money, you should pay tax, yet we forget that sometimes people have option of shifting their base to outside India. So I think that flight of capital and flight of HNIs, one must have a look at, review.
There are many considerations that Sitharaman will have to balance on the direct tax front. Tax revenues have outperformed expectations this year as the economy has recovered strongly. Budget makers will be keen to make sure that this is what happens in 2022-23 as well, while ensuring not to increase a tax burden on taxpayers and corporates.
Moving on from taxes to farm sector, we have an interview with noted agriculture economist Ashok Gulati to explain the finer points of subsidies and reforms. Dr. Gulati tones down the expectation level, saying revolutionary changes are unlikely, in his conversation with Sanjeev Mukherjee. Listen in.
As the union budget comes, is announced in the next few days, we have with us Dr. Gulati to speak on various issues related to agriculture rural sector. Welcome to the show, sir. Start with you first, what is your expectations from the union budget?
I would say there is already a lot going to be in the budget. The biggest items for agriculture and food sector are going to be food and fertilizer subsidy. And that's going to eat away quite a bit of resources of the union budget. Agriculture credit will be pumped up. That's through NABARD largely. There could be already agriculture infrastructure fund that was announced, and if something more can be done, FPOs, that entire process in which already the things were on. Maybe they would be enhanced a bit. Last thing that I would expect is, because the resources are quite tight, whether PM-KISAN would be augmented or not from 6,000 to something better for the farmers.
Do you think the overall, after this repeal of the laws, the repeal of the acts, the overall appetite for anyone to take any big reforms in the agriculture has gone down or diminished now?
Much of the agriculture policy in the past had been focused on the production side. These three reforms were more on the marketing side. Now, somehow, the narrative that was created is it is not in the interest of the farmer. Now they have withdrawn the laws. So any major marketing reforms are out of the question, out of the window now. And I don't think any government would touch that in the coming years. My only feeling is the demand for MSP being made legal can be even regressive if the government accepts that. It will have major implications for the economy.
What do you think will be the trajectory of subsidies in the coming financial year in 22-23? Do you think our free distribution of food grains will continue, or the burden will continue in case of food, or also in case of fertilizer?
You know, it's very unfortunate that instead of investing in R&D or in extension, which is the right way to go ahead for agriculture, our political democratic system moves by throwing more and more of doles, subsidies. Either you reduce the coverage under the National Food Security Act from 67% to say 40% or even 30% today, or you increase the issue price and link it to the economic cost. So at least half of that has to be recovered. So economic cost, if it is 40 rupees, then the price of rice in the public distribution system can be say 20 rupees a kg rather than 3 rupees a kg. Otherwise, the government will go bust. So I feel that there will be a pressure on the government resources. They may not be able to reform the fertilizer subsidy, but there is scope on the food subsidy front if they can at least contain the coverage in terms of what percentage of population to be covered, or increase the issue price.
Do you think the government and the overall budget trajectory will be more towards populism and less towards reforms and modest thing?
Of course. Our elections means populism. Right now, left and right, every chief minister is announcing free power as if they are distributing their own wealth. And the election commission is sleeping. Literally, all these things should be banned.
Thank you to Dr. Gulati for such an enriching discussion.
Thank you for having me.
Among the important points that Dr. Gulati has made is that farmers need a better deal, not more subsidies. Taking off from there, let's look at the growth in expenditure for agriculture and rural sectors over the years. There's merit in the NDA government's claim of a steep rise in agriculture spend since it came to power in 2014. But there's a twist. The nuts and bolts of agri budgeting will explain things.
The actual expenditure on agriculture and allied activities in 2015-16, according to budget documents, was 23,694 crore rupees. This was raised to 1.48 trillion rupees in the 2021-22 budget, a rise of almost 1.25 trillion rupees or a whopping 526% in 7 years. Now, if we go beyond this headline number, there is also an element of smart budgeting. Since 2016-17, the central government has been including in its budget even the interest subvention that it gives on short-term crop loans under the head Agriculture and Allied Activities. That apart, overall the agriculture budget has indeed seen a rise under the current dispensation, mainly on account of expenditure on schemes like the Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana, where the centre shares a portion of the premium subsidy, and PM-KISAN, which is India's first large-scale experiment with direct income support. PM-KISAN, which was announced just ahead of the 2019 Lok Sabha elections, had an allocation of 75,000 crore rupees at the start, but that was scaled down to 65,000 crore rupees per year in the 2021-22 revised estimates due to a lower number of beneficiaries. In case of rural development, the spending has usually been over 1 trillion rupees per year since 2016-17, but that too saw a big rise in the 2020-21 budget because of a surge in demand for MGNREGS work during the first COVID lockdown of March 2020. In FY22 revised estimates, spending for the rural development sector galloped to 2.16 trillion rupees, up almost 49.39% over the budget estimate for that year. The main reason for that was a sharp rise in spending under flagship MGNREGS. As millions of casual workers moved from cities to rural areas, sometimes walking miles for days together, MGNREGS was their savior. Seeing a sharp rise in work demand, the centre opened its purse strings, and in 2020-21, around 81.3% more was spent on the scheme, taking it to over 1.12 trillion rupees for the year. Despite the economy remaining open, even during the deadly second COVID wave in May-June of 2021, demand for MGNREGS work from rural areas remained robust, barring seasonal blips. Even today, more than 20 million casual workers every month are seeking work under the scheme, data show. This is higher than the normal work demand in pre-COVID years. What does that mean?
When we come to MGNREGA, the problem is that, with the onset of COVID, there was considerable movement to the rural areas from the cities. So the MGNREGA budget is likely to be enhanced this year by around 20 to 30% over last year. And if we look at PM-KISAN, there again the income support is likely to continue.
According to experts, first, rural recovery and rural job market have yet to return to normalcy. And second, the scheme will need another big fund infusion in the forthcoming budget to push rural consumption. Will the central government bite the bullet? We will wait and watch.
It's time for the softer aspects of budget now. While earlier finance ministers quoted political personalities in budget, Manmohan Singh was a trendsetter in showcasing the aesthetic side of a budget. And why not? After months of dealing with numbers in the run-up to the budget, poetry is a good way to let the hair down.
From Rabindranath Tagore to Thiruvalluvar, poets have been invoked in the House to make a lighter comment here and a dig there over the years. This is perhaps the only moment when members cutting across party lines laugh or at least smile together when the budget is read. You may remember that Nirmala Sitharaman had begun the budget speech last year with these lines from Tagore. Faith is the bird that feels the light and sings when the dawn is still dark. She was referring to the difficult times during COVID. Though P. Chidambaram's favourite may have been Thiruvalluvar, he quoted Tagore in his 1997-98 budget. Thy call has sped over all countries of the world, but where is India? Let her take up her burden and march with all. Pranab Mukherjee opted for Kautilya's Arthashastra to make his speech lively in the 2010-11 budget. 2 years later, he famously quoted from Shakespeare's Hamlet, I must be cruel only to be kind. That was his way of introducing the tax proposals. Finance ministers from Jaswant Singh to Yashwant Sinha and Arun Jaitley have all tried to cut the boredom of the budget speech with verses. But guess who started it all? Manmohan Singh. In his 1991 landmark budget, Singh had famously quoted from Victor Hugo, no power on earth can stop an idea whose time has come. Ode to the Bard has remained an integral part of the union budget from then on.
Carrying on with the tradition of verses, Nirmala Sitharaman may have already finalized her lines for that literary touch. On that poetic note, we come to the end of this episode. See you on Saturday with a lot more on budget.
If you like this video, share it and subscribe to Business Standard. For more news, views and insights, log on to www.business-standard.com. Do also follow us on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Telegram and LinkedIn.